Why should Instagram have all the art fun?
Why not bring the art conversation to LinkedIn?
I'm Melissa, an artist and a culture sleuth.
I'm Nina. I'm a visual storyteller, a LinkedIn content creator, and a photographer.
Creativity is as vital for a successful business venture as it is for an artist.
So why is the conversation about art and business segregated to different social media platforms?
It's that question that led us to start a live show on LinkedIn.
We interview fascinating experts and explore art and how it relates to business, technology, and education.
Welcome to this episode of An Artful Life, curious conversations about the ways humans make and use art.
And welcome. Hey, this actually worked. Welcome, everybody, to our 6th edition of An Artful Life. And today's guest is Shannon Robinson. She's a collector and art advocate, and we're very excited to dig in with her in a second. You all know by now, hopefully, Melissa Heffelin, my co-host and an artist, a painter. Melissa, why don't you introduce Shannon to our audience?
I would love to. I met Shannon for the first time in Charleston, South Carolina, when she gave a lovely reception for artists and staff of Oil Painters of America. And I could see that she was passionate about art and knew everybody in the room and had a long relationship with the work of the other painters whom I admire. And I thought, I really want to find out who this woman is and get to know her. And so I did a little rooting around and was excited to find out that her specialty is collecting.
Excellent. So Shannon, give us just a 2-sentence or 5-sentence, your background, and so we kind of know, have a little bit context when we're talking about your expertise on today's talk.
Well, thank you for having me, and I want to applaud both of you. You're both extraordinary women with great stories, and what you're doing is really important. So that's kind of what we're all about. Is 25 years ago, we started this nonprofit foundation known as Windows to Divine. And our goal is, in essence, to educate people about the importance of the arts in our lives and to support artists and to make people have a better understanding of what artists live through, how hard their vocation is, but how necessary it is. So we've been doing shows and exhibitions and symposia for 25 years. We worked with galleries and museums. We've had shows at museums as well. But again, it's all about art and getting art into every single person's life. That's my mission.
I love your mission.
Very much so.
Which leads us right into our first question, which is, why do you believe, or how did you come to believe, that every person can and should collect original art?
You know, art, like so many areas, suffers sometimes from myths. And there are a lot of myths around the art industry. The first of one is that you have to be wealthy to be a collector, that you have to have 100 works to be a collector, and on and on and on the myths go. And I think one of the problems that kind of aids that myth are probably the auction house headlines that we see about millions and millions of dollars for pieces of art. And so people start thinking, well, golly, I don't have that. I can't possibly do it. The other thing is the art world itself can be intimidating. And most people have never been to a gallery show. They go to museums. We have a lot of people who do that. But beyond the museums, I don't think people feel as welcome as they should to art events. And so that's another thing we talk a lot about, is the importance of inviting people to go to events with us. So that they can feel comfortable, because art really, unless you grew up with it, for most of us, we're pretty intimidated by it. We think, oh, I'm afraid to buy because I don't know anything. And oh, should I do this? And a lot of people are very successful in their businesses, and they're afraid also to admit they don't know anything about art. Mm-hmm. And so that creates some awkwardness as well. So those myths we have to get rid of and really get everybody to understand that every human being biologically actually needs art. And that's another subject we're doing a lot of work on now.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
That is fascinating. I was going to tell the story, but screw the story. Tell us more.
Well, we're actually working on right now. I'm working on a presentation that I will be giving at several conventions next year and also at our show this November. And it fundamentally is a call to artists and collectors and art lovers to talk about what each one of us needs to do to have a grassroots movement to really make art a cultural norm again. And so one of the biggest things that has happened recently that we aren't talking about, we really need to, is all the sciences that are coming out, and they are proving that the human body actually needs art. And so it's not a matter of art just being a luxury, oh, how nice hobby. No, every human being, every brain is wired for art. So right now I'm reading a lot of wonderful books, and I'll be talking about the brain and how it processes imagery and all kinds of things. We'll talk about performing as well. And it's just so exciting because art is good for you. So now it's not just a matter of being an addict like I am, because I love the beauty of art, but it's actually good for me, which will make me very dangerous out there when I'm talking to people about buying art, because now I can say, no, it really is good for you. You really need it.
It's like dark chocolate and red wine, right?
Right, exactly.
I really look forward to hearing that research because I've read a great deal about how, for example, humans biologically benefit from singing together, which supports how a lot of religious organizations have the hymns in their rituals, and you sing together, dancing together, doing theater together. Your cells can be measured that they're healthier afterwards, but I hadn't heard any research about visual art yet, so I will really look forward to that.
Yeah,
it's pretty fascinating, and it'll affect everything we think about. Things like dealing with chronic pain, headaches. Art really is very helpful with cortisol, which elevates your stress levels. They use dance for Parkinson's disease patients, have had amazing success. Art is really helpful for fighting dementia. On it goes. And again, it's hours of discussion about that subject, but it's really important that we get this out there because it's good for our health. We want everybody to be healthy physically and mentally.
Fascinating. So Melissa, does that kind of
That covers two.
Yeah, that covers question number 2. I was just going to say, yes, absolutely. So then, what was what happened? I mean, so you're a lawyer by trade, right? And then what happened? When did you become, or have you always been an art collector? And what formalized it for you?
Actually, my first experience, I did not have an arts background in any way. But when I first started practicing law, there was a woman who represented some fairly well-known Southwest artists who would go around to law firms and show them original works and invite them to, acquire those works. When she came to us, I was only 21 years old at the time, just starting practice, maybe 22. And I thought, oh, I can't afford any of this. And she said to me, well, okay, well, you could have a Monet poster. And of course, I didn't know one thing or another. And I said, okay, I love Monet. Who doesn't love Monet, right? So she did a beautiful framing job, brought it back to the office. And she said, Shannon, do you know for the amount of money you paid for this print and the frame, you could have had an original work of art? And I said, you're kidding. And that was that. I never, ever again had a poster or print. And she would come regularly, and she would start coming to my house. My husband actually joked and said he was going to give her a finder's fee to never come back. It got me kind of into the spirit of it, and it just kept growing and growing. And then, of course, once we started the foundation, where we are, we have shows every other year and sometimes every year, and I curate those shows. I believe in my artists, and of course, I have pretty much any artist that's been not any artist, but many artists who've been in our shows are in my collection. So I love them all, personally know them. And that's another thing I encourage collectors to do too, is to get to know the artist, because it just makes an even richer experience.
We both noticed that you seem to have a particular passion for living artists, and I wondered why.
Well, I often joke that the dead ones don't need us. So that's the bottom line. And I go into galleries, and there are some that, of course, do have deceased artists. And particularly when you get into the subject of art as investment, you have to be prepared to talk about deceased artists. And that's a very complicated subject, to say the least. And I have given talks on that subject. But I believe that artists have a special calling. And I feel like they are extraordinary beings who need to be supported by society. And again, they're alive, and people need to understand that they have bills to pay, they have children raising, all these things, and we need to support them. And it's just it's a difficult vocation, but it's in my mind, it's the most important vocation there is. And I think the arts have always been the record of human history. Artists are, you are our journalists, so to speak, and we have to support you. So it's a privilege every time I meet an artist. I always admire them, and I just want other people to understand them and support them.
Thank you. Speaking as for both of us two artists, thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
If you were speaking to someone who was tentative about investing and they wanted to know, about buying art, and they wanted to know how should they think of it and as an investment? Should they think of it and as an investment? How do you have that conversation with a beginning collector about whether art is or isn't an investment?
It depends upon the collector and the reasons that they are coming to the art world, so to speak. Clearly, some, again, are very successful entrepreneurs, and they want art because it is an investment, and they've heard about it, seen the papers, and so they're coming to you for that reason. But a lot of times, if the collectors or the soon-to-be collectors that I meet, they just don't know anything about art, and you engage them in conversation about art, and I try to do that with everybody I meet, and just at some point say, well, do you have any art in your house? And eventually I end up going to their house, and the scary thing, as most collectors know me, say is she has a memory for every wall in the house. And so I will remember your walls. So you can't say to me, oh, I don't have any room, because I say, oh, but you know that around the corner, there is that space there. But the point of it is art is this wonderful journey. It is a fabulous experience. It makes you happy. There are physical reasons for that. Again, the brain, cognitive functioning, but it's a joy. And I want everyone to experience this joy. And every time I have a collector, or even the very first painting, and that's always the most exciting, once they hang it, they're hooked. And they're like, oh my gosh, I need more of this. And of course I say, yes, you do. I'm very good at affirming that at every point that I can. But there's nothing more wonderful than the person who is first time getting into it. In fact, we had somebody at our show last year from San Francisco, and her aunt is one of our collector members, and she came out to the show, and she ended up buying 2 or 3 paintings. And she was over the moon, and we were running around like little kids looking at work, and the excitement is palpable. And so you want everybody to have this joy, but people have to have that first experience. And again, the art world's intimidating, and unless you can introduce them to it and make them feel comfortable, then that's the whole problem. It's a very small group of people, frankly, that are collecting, and we need to grow that base, and that's one of our missions.
Do people talk to you at all about budget, like having a budget for art, or is it more of a visceral, like I need to have and own this and I'll make it work somehow experience?
Well, most everyone, I wouldn't say everyone has a budget per se, and you kind of have to just sense that with people by giving them different price ranges and that sort of thing, and you kind of get a sense of that. Most collectors, I think we're all just, a budget really is a joke for most of us, and that's why we get into trouble, because we don't abide by our budget. Because when we see something that connects with us, it's like an addiction. I have to have it. I mean, I joke sometimes I am in a need of an intervention, and I think most collectors feel that way, because if you love it, you love it, and sometimes you're rational about it. That's all there is to it. But it's such a joy. It's just wonderful. Back to your beginning, though, when you talked about investment, we do a lot of presentations about investment and why to collect, how to start collecting. And investment is an important issue, and it's important for many collectors if they get to a certain point. And I say, it depends. Everyone's finances are different. And so you need to, if you're at a point where you're putting some money into this paintings, and it's a significant thing, you have to really think about it. How can I pay for it? Well, then that is starting to look like an investment for you. So you probably need to be thinking about Am I collecting willy-nilly? Am I putting something together, a body of work that's cohesive? Do I have a theme? It becomes a lot of issues. So you have what we call recreational collectors who are just, whatever hits me wherever I am, and they just go with the flow. But I think most collectors are a combination of recreation and a little bit of investment, at least.
The problem with the investment is that it's an emotional investment. I did one of my very first purchase was an investment. I shouldn't even say air quotes. It was a major investment, a notable artist, and it's still hanging in my bedroom. And there's just no effing way in the world I would part with that picture. I think I would sell my apartment before I sell that picture.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Now, some collectors are fine with doing that, selling, but most of the collectors I work with actually are like you and me. I just don't sell the work because it is part of you. It's part of your life. You're looking at it every day, and you have a relationship with it. I know that sounds a little odd, but you do. And so that kind of collector is very different from somebody who's just flipping works and that sort of thing. And those are not the collectors that I work with, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, so I would assume that people who work with you are collecting to enjoy it and hang it in their homes and offices, and not like have it in a vault somewhere or in a cellar somewhere, right? So, and
for the most part, although there are a few I've come across who do the vault business. But of course that's their choice, and it's still important because it is supporting artists. So you don't ever want to discourage that. But again, art is such a gift to the world that you really want people to share it. So, for instance, I have people come all the time to my house so that they can see lots of different art and get an idea of hanging and how things can come together, because that's another thing. Most people, even if they are learning about art itself enough to collect, they don't really have any clue about curating art for the most part and how to hang it and all those sorts of things. So that's another thing I do, is I go to people's houses and help them with that. Just say, well, you could consider doing this. And, I have a measurement system with a little grid that I give out to everybody here. Use this, and then everything will be hung at the same height. Just those kind of tips that most people wouldn't know otherwise.
It's true. It's overwhelming to many people. Yeah. And I was curious, how do you help new people wanting to begin to put their feet in the water, but they worry that they don't have an eye? How do you help them discover what their taste is and have a more or perhaps have a more discerning trained eye, or not? How do you think about that?
What I tend to do is I will send them images of artworks from a couple of galleries that work with us a lot, just as a starting point. And I will ask them, so just go through these images and then pick out your favorites, kind of thing. And then we can talk about it, and I can find out what is it that is drawing you to it. Are you a person that is driven by memories because these paintings are just fond memories or whatever? Are you a person driven by color? Are you a person that, again, is driven by narrative stories? There's just all these different pathways that we all have in terms of viewing and enjoying art. And then the other thing is, again, I encourage them to go look, 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 look. You cannot look enough. The only way to get an eye for art is to look. I mean, it is important to read. I'm amazed how many people know nothing about art history, and I really try to encourage them, hey, it is important. It'll just really flesh out a lot of things for you if you do that.
And it's interesting. It weaves into all of the other histories of mankind, of technology, of economy, of national borders shifting. It's all interlaced.
Yeah.
Well, an interesting art history is the history of culture and civilization. So I do a number of art histories, and it's kind of scary. In 1 hour, I'll cover 1,000 years of art history. So anybody who's an expert out there is dying and saying, oh my God, that's obnoxious. But you have to realize your audience doesn't have much time. And the other thing that's helpful about that is when you can condense things down into an hour, people see the big picture. They don't
Yeah.
get mired down, which art historians do. And when we're in art history class, we do what we're memorizing and that sort of thing. They don't have that big view. So at our foundation, we really work hard to have people understand a big view so they can see these patterns, because art reflects what's happening in that culture. So when you
Absolutely.
start talking about art, you know what's happening in those societies because you're looking at the art. It's really
Just look at
fun.
monks scream, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have less a question than a statement, which I actually think is quite interesting, and maybe you want to expand on it, Shannon. Chandel Hansen, not sure whether I'm pronouncing her name right, says the liberal arts, especially fine arts, are losing ground fast in American universities. At the very time people need art for mental health, universities are cutting liberal arts and general education. So do you see yourself sort of filling that gap maybe a little bit, Shannon, with your foundation?
I do, and I'm thank you for that statement, because it's exactly what we're talking about this year and going forward. We are hoping to launch basically a public awareness campaign that will reach out to people. Schools need to have art back in the schools. Hospitals need to have art. Public buildings need to have art. And I certainly appreciate that there's plenty of public art out there. I mean, that's been going on for quite some time. But this notion of the health and art benefits is so important, because now if we can educate people about this, we can then hopefully make our case that art is not a luxury. It's not a commodity. Art really is an experience that every human being needs. And when you're involved in the arts, you're going to actually be physically healthier, mentally healthier. And in this day and age, we can all agree that we have a lot of problems with mental health, depression, etc. And the world is clamoring for a sense of purpose, hope, and the arts give you that. And the arts have always been one of the great mechanisms for bringing people together and communicating. But now more than ever, where communication skills seem to be fairly non-existent in our world, this is where the arts need to step up. And this is where people need to say, wait a minute, art is not some little thing, if we have time, footnote.
Yeah.
Art should be number one. We need to make art, our culture needs to be art-centric again. It has to be a norm of behavior. That's happened throughout various periods of art history, and we can do it again. So I'm hoping we're on the verge of a renaissance on that. And what'll be key to it will be all this new science and research about the health benefits of arts.
Yeah.
You've touched on a little bit already in the conversation, but Nina and I are curious, what are some of the streams through which your organization encounters people who are open to becoming collecting? How do you outreach and do the work that you do?
Really mostly through events. Events are time consuming, so I will not, I won't minimize that. And if you're going to sit there, and if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to talk about cost benefit analysis with me and events, I say don't bother, because you're going to look at it that way. No, it can't ever make enough money to make it worth all the hours that goes into it. But you absolutely have to have events. And you can have them obviously on Zoom and, using the digital thing, and everybody had to do that with COVID and they continue to do it. But I think now more than ever, there's a real need for personal in-person events. People are losing their interpersonal skills to communicate. We all know that. They need to be back with people again. And what better way to gather than to be looking at beauty all around you? And again, most people have never done that. So we really need to get out there and say, hey, come to this show. Art Students Leagues. I talk to those folks and I say, hey, let's do a program. We'll bring collectors there. Do you have your own collector base that comes and supports and buys the art of your students? Usually the answer is no. And I'm like,
Wow.
We really need to take our ateliers, our art schools. We need to start even in high school with competitions where we're promoting, arts. We need to look at this as the life of this artist and the vocation. We need society to be supporting gifted people early, stay with them so that you can support them and invigorate them so they will have a career in the arts, which is a hard career to have. But without our support, it's really unlikely it's going to happen, or very, very few will do it.
Yeah.
When I was an art student in Los Angeles, I went to Otis Parsons, which is now Otis Art Institute, for 2 years. And at the end of each semester, the whole institute had a student work sale, and it was really well attended. And we had some amazing professors. We had some of the best craft art highly skilled artist students as my co-students, and you could get something genuinely beautiful as from a more mature professional for student prices. And it was amazing for us because we'd been in school for a semester with no income, and people got really nice things, and you stood there and talked to people about it. It was a really nice experience, I think, for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's so important to, again, have those experiences. And I'm always amazed how short-sighted the art industry is, that we kind of tend to just, well, when you're at mid-career, right? Okay, now we've got you. I'm like, well, what about everything before we get to mid-career? And so going to the schools, and when you talk about new collectors, I encourage them to go to Art Student League shows, to go to co-ops, which sometimes have less expensive art, to go even to the fairs with art. You have to be careful. I always tell them, now don't go spending any real money. And just, it could be a lot of junk out there. Just kind of be careful.
I've bought some nice pieces at.
It does happen. It does. And again, if you create a little budget for yourself, and I always say to people, you know what, figure out a price point where I call it the throw it on the floor. Don't worry about whether it's good, not good. Just, if it's $100, $200, or $500, stop angsting over, is this a good piece of art? Will it appreciate? I mean, it's $500 or $100 or $50. Let that go. Just enjoy it and start growing and training your eye. So you want to see as many different pieces of media as you can. Go to as many events as you can. It's the only way really to get that eye that you need.
The last time I was at a fair, I saw this piece that I fell in love with immediately. It was like $200, $250. But then I didn't want to buy it alone because I thought it would be lonely in my apartment, because it was an oil painting and I have all the stuff I have is print. So I bought a companion piece so the poor piece wouldn't be lonely.
That sounds like one of my rationalizations. Trust me, I have many.
and I never really made friends with the companion piece, and I keep telling the piece that I fell in love with, I hope you appreciate what I've done for you, because I really did this for you, not for myself.
I get it. Like I said, I have so many rationalizations that sometimes get it.
Absurd. We can rationalize ourselves. It's like, I think we women are probably even more better at it than many of the men are, because we rationalize ourselves into many purchases, I guess.
Well, I think men do very well in the arts arena in that way too. Trust me, I have dealt with many couples, and that's always an interesting challenge too, is because no two people have exactly the same taste. Yeah. And so I have had many where it was almost like, remember that movie, The Divorce Thing, where they drew the red line through the house? And so I said, well, you take one room, she can take another room, if you feel that strongly about it, and you just cannot reconcile the taste. Because it is really important to think about, when you buy something, how well is it going to work with what you have? Now, if you only have one or two other pieces, go for it. You can have all different rooms with different things, but people who really have a collection fairly well established, honestly, I think they do have to sit there and go, will this one play well with the others, so to speak?
Yeah. So, I mean, homes are one thing, but what would you say, for instance, to a CEO who has no art in his headquarters or in his offices? How would you start with somebody like that?
I would probably do the same sort of process, which is to get an idea of his or her personal taste. Also, what is the mission of the business? Who are their customers? What is their philosophy? They have a passion that they're, focused on. Are they interested in promoting artists in that town or that region or whatever? I mean, many corporations will build regional collections and that sort of thing, or Colorado artists only. So that's, sometimes that's one of the first things you need to establish is, do they have some intention already in mind? And so you want to know what that intention is so you can then build around it. But there's so many possibilities, in not just corporations and hospitals, hotels. We're now finally seeing hotels getting somewhat serious about the art they hang. I want to do a shout out to the Benson Hotel here in Colorado, out by the Anschutz Medical Center. It is the most extraordinary collection in a hotel I've seen in my life. And Willie Matthews was one of the curators involved with it. And I believe they have over 300 original paintings. And they knew what the building was going to look like, but they designed the spaces, commissioned the art, so it all goes together seamlessly.
Oh, wow.
It is fabulous. And that's one of the messages we have to give to architects and designers, another one of my things. And that is, the art doesn't come last. The art needs to come up at the very beginning. And, because this notion, I mean, people spend extraordinary amounts on light fixtures and, things like that. And I go in and I say, oh my God, you spent $60,000 on this light fixture. Do you know what kind of art you could have had for that and how many pieces you're going to really? But again, that's a problem. We need the designers and architects to really start cultivating the whole notion of art being integral to any project they have. And there many successful architects and designers do that, as a matter of course, no question. But it's something they all need to do, if you ask me.
I think that that administrators of large companies and big buildings that could hold art don't really realize that. I think it could come out of their advertising budget. Think of a Catholic cathedral that's got the stained glass with the story of the Bible and the mission of their whole church. Every piece of art in many different religious organizations is delivering their message in all kind. Oh, I just got goosebumps. And it's a missed opportunity.
Absolutely. And that's also, I know, like my own parish here, they have a number of pieces from our shows. And I remember going and saying, hey guys, look at these walls. This is ridiculous. You need to have inspiring paintings on these walls. But again, they don't know anything. And people are so intimidated. They just feel like, well, where would I start? So that's why we need to make it easy. We need to make it friendly, and just really get people participating in it so it becomes a normal, everyday deal.
Yeah. Which I think is a great segue into our next question, Melissa.
Yes, it is. It's perfect. The name of your nonprofit is Windows to the Divine. Can you talk about why you called it To the Divine and what relationship do you believe art has to the divine?
Ooh, that's a big question. One I love, though. Well, when we started this foundation 25 years ago, we were connected with the Dominican Order, the Order of Preachers, which is an order that goes back to the 1200s. And it is an order that, by its very charism and name, preaching. So they were very focused on getting out, and in those days, literally out into farmlands, etc., to bring the gospel to people because they couldn't read. And as you know, the church was one of the really greatest patrons of the arts, really in all of history. And they very much understood the power of art to tell the story, particularly in the beginning when no one could read the story themselves. And I actually have a video on our website if you want to see that whole tracing of Western art. We go through that whole thing, and it's really, really fun. So anyway, they approached us, the Dominicans, and said, will you help us raise money? And I was like, okay, well, what's your hook, right? And they were like, well, we don't know. And I said, well, you have all these other great charities, and if you're just going to say, yeah, we're this, Catholic group running around, I mean, it's no small thing when you talk about the Word of God. But we came up with the notion of the arts because Fra Angelico, one of the great early Renaissance painters, was actually a Dominican. And he would pray. They said he never picked up a paintbrush without praying first. He is, of course, the canon saint, patron saint of artists. And so the Dominicans actually have a very long, rich history with the arts. So we kind of dived into that and started having shows. And fortunately, from the very beginning, people encouraged us to go ahead and have our own show and have a really high quality show. So we did not go down the path of just this is a little church show with, this little angel here, angel there. And we were lucky to hook up with people like Kwang Ho and Dan Sprick and so many of the greats. And so one thing just led to another. But to your point, Melissa, about the divine, one of the things we talk a lot about is the importance of beauty. And our upcoming show is called Reverence for Beauty. And beauty and the divine are totally connected. And I do enjoy talking about that so that people can understand that beauty is a reflection of the divine creator spirit that dwells not only around us, but I believe within each human being. And so I feel it's appropriate, whether you call it divine, spirit, whatever word. One of the things at our foundation that we're going to start doing is expanding even broader to really talk about the importance of beauty in everyone's lives and the broader spiritual journey that we're all on. And I think the arts have always been the best way of exploring that story, developing that story. So we always acknowledge, and again, it's not a matter of going out and talking about we're Catholic or they're Jewish or whatever. In fact, our show was birthed with collaboration with particularly the Jewish community in Denver. I sat on the Meisel Museum board for many years. So we had a lot of Judaica. We also had Buddhist works, and it was wonderful. The sad thing was, though, and I have to be honest about this, the demand for religious art is so small. And that affects, of course, how many artists can then, live doing that. And what we found is collectors, once they bought icons, bought Judaica, they were like done. And so it was like, okay. And now from the very beginning, we always looked at the whole spectrum of art as all of it is your spirit. It didn't matter whether it was still life or landscape or whatever. So we just kind of kept going and going with that. So we still have some explicitly religious art in every show, but it's usually only a handful of works because frankly, there just aren't that many artists out there doing that work at a high enough level, frankly, to be in the shows that we have. But it's like everything, it's all about demand. And I keep saying we need to get back to like the Dutch Golden Age in the 1600s where everybody was buying art. And yet at that time, the church this was a new democracy in Holland. There was no aristocracy, no church. Well, who were the patrons? Businesses, bakers, candlestick makers. Everybody had art in their shops. And there was a competition as to who had better art. And guess who came out of those periods? The great artists like Vermeer, Rembrandt. So great art comes about when you have demand. Yep. So that's why we have to really understand the importance of increasing demand, which means you got to get out there and make your case about why everyone needs art.
Yeah.
Nina, may I stick in a surprise question that gurgled to the surface?
Please do.
I have a passion for supporting women artists. And Shannon, I know you know that museums oscillate between, in their historical work, 3 to 6% of female artists, if that, in some of our great museums. And now with living artists, do you find your collectors are gender blind, or is there do you sense any difference there?
Honestly, I would have to say that I think my experience with myself, in fact, and collectors is I do think they are gender blind, which is really intriguing because you think, well, if we're not paying attention to whether it's a man or a woman, then why is it that there are so few women artists actually in museums, et cetera, right? So clearly, I think women suffer from the history. And of course, when you go back and you talk about women couldn't even go to art schools, right? And, Mary Cassatt had to use her, her family, and they couldn't even, draw the nude or anything like that. So that was a clear explanation why men had such a jump start on women. But it still is puzzling to me today that the percentages are still pretty small. Because again, I'm not encountering people with that bias. Now, it depends on the genre of art too, perhaps. There may be some genres that might be considered more masculine, if you will, I suppose. But in my experience, every genre is open, and I don't see men or women dominating. And maybe that also makes it hard to promote women, because I think a lot of collectors are gender blind, and so they kind of look at me like, why are we even why are we talking about this subject? So it is
It's a
it is
wonderful
a puzzling one.
But it's so great, though, that contemporary collectors do seem to be gender blind, and I think that's true. I experience that too. You're judged on your work now, I think.
Exactly. I don't think people care about your name, your background, anything. I mean, that's not to say that there aren't many collectors out there who are looking at underrepresented groups. Let's just say African American collections and that sort of thing. I mean, there are collectors out there, and that's their theme, and they are committed to it, and it's wonderful. But for the average, really recreational collector who's just kind of, oh, I love that, I love that. I don't see that they pay any attention to whether it's male, female, or whatever.
In over your 30 years of working with the artists to shift away from the collectors, what have you learned about artists?
Gosh, artists are just amazing human beings to me. First of all, I cannot draw a straight line, and I'm not kidding when I say that. I have no real ability to do that. And the artists say, well, if you could. And I'm like, but why should I? I'd rather be an advocate for you. You have the talent, you have the discipline, because it takes great discipline. It is your calling. My calling is to support you and to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So, it works out really well in that respect. So anyway, I don't know, I can go on and on.
Let's look at some of the work that you have.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I love that.
So
it's a piece.
It's pretty big. Yeah.
And that's Adrian Stein. I know it is.
It is Adrian Stein. Oh, thank you. Yes, I never really have pictures of me with the art. It's almost never. But yes, this is called the Orange Blossom Madonna, and it is a large work. And Adrian is just an incredible, incredible artist. She was our Frangelico Artist of the Year last year. And when we do our shows, we pick one exceptional artist in every show, and we basically allow them to create a body of works. And so last year in Denver, she created a body of works. And Adrian is really fascinating because she really fuses both the natural world, and so she has a lot of florals and botanicals. But I think one of her great strengths is the figure, particularly female figure. And she really has a commitment to the sacred feminine. And I just think her paintings are just breathtakingly beautiful. And this painting is really interesting to me, perhaps because of my background and whatnot. I love Madonnas. Mm-hmm. This Madonna is really exceptional because I will be the first to say that in almost every piece of a Madonna and child, either the child looks weird or the Madonna looks weird or something. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I don't care how great the artist was. I mean, yes, there are a few that are perfect, but for the most part, that's not the case. And for the most part, it's obviously the infant Jesus. And this child is an older child. It is a beautiful child that I think every mother, anybody can relate to that child. And of course, the Madonna is beautiful, harkens back to Melissa's in Spain. So I don't know if you catch that feeling of Spanish in here. But again, her work is just incredibly beautiful, and she's thoughtful. I know her well. She has a beautiful, sensitive soul. She has great integrity and really is just someone everybody, if you meet her, really, really enjoys her. She just has one of those souls that you want to be with.
And quick blurb, she just has, I think, still up a beautiful solo show at Gallery 1261 on Delaware Street in Denver. So don't miss it.
I think that show has passed. They have, I think their anniversary show is up.
Okay.
Kwang, her husband, Kwang Ho, is going to have a solo show in October at 1261. And they live between Denver and Pennsylvania, because she's from Pennsylvania. So most of the time they're in Pennsylvania.
I'm going to move on.
I have followed Scott Fraser since I was in art school. I love his work, and I'm a still life painter at heart. So great choice.
Yes. Well, Scott, I have also known for many years. Scott is, to me, one of the finest realist, maybe hyper-realist painters in the country. His work is in over 30 museums, public collections, so he is well established. He has not only, of course, an extraordinary craft and ability to paint anything, and his focus generally is nature, but also Scott is very whimsical too. Now this, I wouldn't call this a whimsical piece, but if you've looked at his work, he has things like monkeys doing various little things. He has Hershey's Kisses and Ferris wheels with Hershey's Kisses. And so he is a very intelligent artist who gives a lot of thought and a lot of care, and it takes a long time for him to do a painting. But he too is just an incredible, he's very shy though. So he's not one that wants to come and like speak on our panels. I've tried to get him to do that, and that's not his thing. But he is very kind and willing to mentor, and I think a lot of people have been very gifted by, his willingness to share.
What about this one?
This is Lou Chong, and Lou, I met him, oh God, I want to say probably about 20 years ago. Lou moved here with his family from China. He actually was going to be a doctor, and so his undergraduate degree was in biology, etc. Unfortunately, he realized that he has this gift. His emphasis is, as you see here, portraits. And I think he's one of the finest portrait artists in this country. I believe that he will definitely be in the National Gallery of Art and some of those. His work is very painstaking. He's very particular about the models, but
it's very thoughtful too.
Oh yes, he has this ability to just captivate you with that face and those eyes. His works are just mesmerizing. And in fact, I saw this painting on his easel. He was working on it when I was in his studio, and I fell head over heels in love with it. And I said to him, "Is this spoken for?" And he said, "Not yet." And I said, "Well, put it in our show." He goes, "I want it." And then he created the title, which that's another subject we could talk about too. Mm-hmm. And the title of this piece is "Hymn Without Words." And I just was blown away by that. I just said, oh my gosh, that just is so powerful. And it is one of my bugaboos with artists, and I do it all the time. Like, can we work on the titles a little bit? And I realize that there's a controversy about, well, you don't want to tell the whole thing or, make the viewer assume X. Mostly that comes from contemporary art and modern art. But I have to tell you, titles sell paintings. They sell paintings, they evoke memories. They connect you sometimes. So I realize it's got to be hard, and you don't want to feel like you're a Hallmark card and you get tired. And artists all the time will call me. They said, "The painting's ready, Shannon, but I don't have a title." And I'll say, "Well, you want me to take a shot?" And they go, "Yes, yes." And so there have been some paintings that I have named that have been in our show, and even a few that I have in my collection. I've said, if you don't mind, I really don't want standing figure one. May I name this piece?
Who was a master of naming was Miro, I feel.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I feel that Miro was a master of naming paintings. He just had this whimsical sense of humor that just put the pictures into because it was so abstract, right? But then he would name it, Man Without a Nose. I don't know, I'm making stuff up, and then it all of a sudden was like, oh okay. It gave you an entree into the image. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it provokes conversation too that might not occur, which is fun, I think. So again, I'm not against titles, but I like narratives too. So
I do too, and I think if you pay attention to a piece's particular personality while you're working on it, it will tell you what its name is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move on to the next one
I
because
love this.
as a
Shannon,
photographer, I must say, wow. Yeah.
Yes, this apple was actually in our show in New York in 20. Let's see, I think it was 2017. We did a collector's art weekend, and we were at the Met for the day, the Metropolitan Museum, and then we also went to the Salmagundi, and they were having their master show. And one of the things we do is we are big on collaboration, and I try to bring our collectors to other shows, support other groups. And so the Salmagundi, I said, "Oh, you're going to have your annual show. Why don't I have our collector trip coincide?" And sure enough, our collectors that night actually bought like, I don't know, it was like more than a third of the show. And so this particular piece was part of, and we had a little tiny show with like 20 works by Skip. And because it was an apple, it made me think of New York and the New York experience. But I think drawings are so important. And again, much of history, they were overlooked, but then people started, appreciating them. But he is just, to me, one of the best graphite artists in the country. And I was floored by this piece. And what was interesting about the piece is when I brought it home, I took it to my framer to reframe probably. And I said, I'm not sure about how much of that white background I want. I want to think about that. Well, he called me and he said, "Shannon, there is no choice." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That's all one piece of paper." And I said, "It is." And I looked, I said, "Oh my," the care of creating all those little edges and everything else. And the light, look at the light. I mean, it's just, that just screams skill, doesn't it? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And the reflection in the polished wood tabletop is beautifully
Right.
done.
Just
Yeah.
incredible.
The details are just out of this world. Yeah.
And the next one is Nina's favorite.
Well, those two are my, well, I like them all, but yeah, I love this one because it just, totally speaks to me. Yeah.
This is Vincent Zeus, and Vincent is, he was our Fra Angelico Artist of the Year in 2022. Our show was in the Hamptons, and we had a fabulous weekend there. And our artists, we kept it a small show with 10 of the top artists in the country. And they came and we had them stay in collectors' homes. And we ran around together for 4 days. And we went to the Pollock House, the Krasner Pollock House, for instance. And the director there did a talk about the Hamptons and the whole movement of the artists and that sort of thing. Well, Vincent was our Artist of the Year, and he did an amazing presentation in our salon about China and kind of the evolution of art in China and how it had impacted him and his style. He's also an architect. And before he became an artist, he built many skyscrapers in China. So he's an amazing person. He lives in New York City and also used to have a house in Napa as well. But he's an extraordinary artist who is dealing with both East and West and fusing East and West perspectives, taking abstraction and figurative clearly and fusing those two. His figures are always beautiful, which really attracts me because I would have to say, if I had to pick my favorite, it is figuratives. But he's sensitive. He wrote actually a poem with this piece that I read, and it captured my heart. And it's called Moment of Meta. And again, I'm sure artists can't be writing for every little piece, but to the extent something really speaks to them, if they're able, and it is a gift of theirs to write, it's again something I would encourage because it just kind of puts you over the top. And when you look around, especially if you collect a lot of art, anything that makes something singular is kind of a good thing, right?
Absolutely stunning. I love how it's out of focus and yet so clear. It's really quite stunning. And I'm not a pink person at all, or yellow for that matter.
There you go. I have my genres that are like that too. So, and by the way, I don't think we've talked about, but I just want to put a plug for our Collectors for Connoisseurship Arts Weekends, which we do every year. They're all around the country. Last year it was in Denver. This year we're having a show in Denver. But we are taking the group to New York. So this October, we're going to be in the Hudson River Valley. We'll be going to the Rockefeller estate and all the normal kinds of things you would expect. And we will just have a wonderful time together. So our collectors travel together, and we have shows here and then shows in other places. Like I said, 22 was in the Hamptons. We had a show. We went to Paris together, Atlanta, Savannah. We spent a lot of time at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and had such great experiences. And to your point, Melissa, I asked them, can you have a student show while we're there? They did, and we ran around. I think I bought 4 or 5 works, and they were besides themselves because the students were like, "Oh, this is so exciting!" and it's just like, the first painting, a collector, when they're like that, the first painting that an artist sells, I love being part of that moment because they're just so full and they're so in awe and excited that someone is affirming them like that. It's just a beautiful thing to be a part of, really.
Yeah.
I love that story. And I have been online and read your itinerary, and you create dazzling trips for your collectors.
Yeah.
We have a lot of
read
fun.
it too.
Yeah. We always,
I was a little envious.
in all our trips, we always have private collections as part of it, so that we're going to people's homes. And it's just, collectors love seeing other people's collections, and just seeing it is fascinating. I've never said, oh, another collection, I don't want to see it. No. It's always different, no two are alike, and it's really a lot of fun.
Well, it's also inspirational, right? Because it's in people's homes, so you can it's not a museum setting.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we're hard up against time. This has been so entertaining and informational and wonderful. We do have one last question, and it's a question we ask everybody. And that is, what is your favorite piece of art, if there is such a thing, in your home or office?
Gosh, that's impossible to answer. For me, especially because
Okay. And
I
that's fine.
probably know every single artist, just about. And so there's a personal story, but I would say the ones that we looked at are some of my favorites for sure, as I explained. But yeah, there's no one I could ever say. In fact, we once had a fire here a couple years ago, and we had to grab a few things. Fortunately, it was far away. And oh my gosh, I actually have a list for myself in event of fire. If you could only take 4 or 5, grab these. Because otherwise, I'd be standing here and I'd get burned probably, because I'd be sitting there going, oh, I like that one. I want that one. Oh, I want that one. I want that one. So there you have it. That's truly an addict when you have instructions like that.
Yeah. But kudos to you for being as organized as to. And by the way, I have a list too of things to grab in my apartment in the order they're being grabbed if there's an emergency. My first thing is my dog. Everything else is gravy. Yeah.
Agree with that. I have 2 Great Danes, so they take up a lot of room is the only problem with that. But one last plug I want to make really quick, and that is people need to get their family involved in arts. Give artists gifts as wedding presents. Get them started. I do this with families all the time for holidays. We go, we look for paintings. That is a great way to get young people and create these collecting families that we need.
Thank you. Shannon, you are a wonderful guest. I feel like I've been at a table with a beautiful meal and my soul has been fed well.
Yes.
Oh, well, you're too kind. I've enjoyed it too.
So agreed. Thank you so much for just sharing so generously of yourself. And this has been really, really delightful. Thank you so much.
And thank you for what you're doing, because we really need more of it.
Yep.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Love all around.
Stay with us after we close.
Yes, and to our audience, thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Your
and
questions.
if you're watching a replay, you can still ask questions. That's what the comments are for. And stay tuned for our next episode, early October, when Melissa and I will talk about being artists and what drives us to make art. So it'll be a bonus first season finale. And wishing you all a wonderful September.
Thank you. Bye.